So up next we have Robert Curtis, who's going to do a chat on visual design for Tableau dashboards, which I'm really, really excited about. It's something that I bang on about quite frequently, about how to use color and what you should actually do. So I can't wait to hear this, and I'm so glad that it's going to be recorded as well. Robert Curtis is an analytics consultant for InterWorks based in Melbourne, Australia. InterWorks is the 5 times Tableau Partner of the Year. Sorry, my screen's just gone dead. Just hold on a moment. Robert has been using Tableau for 3 years and is a certified Tableau trainer. He's taught all over the world to hundreds of students. Robert comes to Tableau Software with 20 years of online marketing and web design background. His chat today is going to discuss how data alone does not make a great dashboard. Much of what contributes to the effectiveness of a dashboard are soft skills like visual design, style, composition, and structure. Robert will present guiding principles that even non-creative people can use to create visually appealing dashboards using techniques and tricks perfected for years in website and graphic design. Thank you so much, Robert. We're really looking forward to your chat today.
Well, thank you for having me. And for those people that turn their volume down for the Robert's presentation, or rather turned it up, you're probably gonna need to turn it down because I am a bit of a loud talker. So let me share my screen. Let me jump in here. I want this one. I'm gonna share the entire screen. So can I get confirmation when you can see this screen here? Let me pull up the chat list here as well as the comments. I like to see everything that's happening. It's pretty cool to see all the familiar names in the chat window there. A very strong, excited data community. I'm sorry you have to listen to another American named Robert, another American named Robert C. So my apologies for that. Hopefully we can keep it interesting and exciting. I am going to be speaking for an hour, so I would say if you do have a question, just jump in here, type it in there, and I'll have a look and see when we can kind of circle through and answer some of those. Okay, so design and planning for effective dashboards. I'm going to talk about kind of a lot of different things. But before I do that, let me introduce myself first. So as mentioned, I am originally from the United States. So I was born in Oklahoma, and about 12 years ago, I came to Australia. And I've been in Melbourne basically ever since. And as mentioned, I've been using Tableau, I think, since 8.2. I've been teaching for about 2 years. And I've gotten to travel all over Southeast Asia. And when I teach virtually, I get to teach students from all over the world. And some of my students are actually in this chat. So it's great to see you guys again. So I came to Tableau, like Fee mentioned, with a background in online marketing. A very broad background. So there's the statistical side of it, which really kind of brought me into data analytics. And there was also the website design, which helped me with the creative side. And then the biggest thing, I think, was this idea of conversion optimization. And that's when you really start to look at your website, not as something pretty, but as a tool. And the tool is to convert online visitors into some sort of metric, whether that's a lead or a sale. And so when I look at my dashboard, that's how I look at it. I don't look at it as a picture. I really don't even look at it like a chart. I look at it as a tool, and I measure my tool a very particular way. That sounded really bad. I don't measure my tool a particular way. I look at dashboards in a particular way. Let's be really clear. All right. Let's hop over here. So what are we going to do today? What am I trying to accomplish in this presentation? My goal is to try to give you guys concrete things that you can look at when designing. Because I know that the population of Tableau users kind of extends onto the very widest scale. We've got people that are extremely technical and really struggle with the creative design side. And then we've got people like Robert that are very creative. And so my goal is to try to speak to this end of the population that aren't as creative, so that I can give you here is a checklist. And so the way you think, you can just look for these things, and it'll help improve your creativity. That'll help improve the effectiveness of your dashboard. So I'm trying to be practical first. And I'm also going to approach this from a step-by-step approach. So I'm going to focus a lot on the visual side of this, but we're going to talk about planning an effective dashboard sort of from start to finish. Okay? Now, I'm going to also put a little bit of a caveat here. I hate it when people apologize before they present, but I'm going to apologize before I present. This is my approach from my background and from my experience. And if you talk to different people in the Tableau community, they're going to probably have a different sort of guidelines, different rules, different ways they look at this. As is evident with Robert, who finds a lot of value in doing these doodles and sort of taking that as inspiration to take that into Tableau. Different people are going to do it different ways. The important thing to think about is there's no right answer. It's what works for you. Now, I've told you what this presentation is. Now let's talk about what this presentation isn't. And this is what you run into whenever you really start to talk about creativity stuff. I am not here to try to give you big, flowery words like, when you're designing a presentation, make sure that it gives you a good energy, or make sure that it makes you happy, or look for the colors. The colors should be positive and cool and flowing. For a technical person, that doesn't mean anything. It's very difficult to kind of get around that gap between the really creative people and the really technical people. Now, I believe that creativity is a skill. And like any skill, you can get better at it with practice. And people like Robert and some of the other more creative people in our community, I'm an artist, I can draw, I can do stuff. It's because we were doing it since we were kids. And so if you had me go play basketball, well, I'm not going to be very good at it because I played almost 0 hours of basketball. So think of creativity not as a genetic trait that you're born with or born without, but think of it as a skill. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And the whole idea with this presentation is to just give you an idea of where to start. I'm going to keep a clock here. All right. Now, until you have that competency, I'm going to direct you to this quote from Neil Gaiman. And his quote was this. He said this at a graduation ceremony. And if you cannot be wise, pretend to be someone who is wise, and then just behave like that person would. So until you actually feel creative, just pretend that you are creative. Fake it until you make it. That's my suggestion. Okay, so I think it's important when we're talking about dashboards to define a success metric. So what is an effective dashboard? I think other people are going to have various opinions on this. Me coming from my background, success is, let me get this slide over, user adoption. Absolutely 100%. This is the only thing that matters. You are bound by how many people are actually using this tool. I come from a web background, so we gauge our success on how many visitors hit our site, how many pages they view, how many people complete the checkout form and become customers. And I think that's a very realistic approach to how successful your dashboard is. Now, if you have a small percentage of people in your company that are going to be accessing this dashboard, user adoption is still the #1 criteria. How often are they using it? When they're using it, how long are they using it per session? These all represent how successful you were at creating a reporting tool. So my #1 rule, if no one uses our tool, it is a useless tool. It doesn't matter how pretty it is, doesn't matter how great the data is, it's all about usage. Now, before we get into this conversation and we really start to unpack everything that we're going to talk about when it comes to planning, I want to define 3 little terms here. And I'm also going to really point those people that want to continue this journey of visual analytics towards the visual analytics class that Tableau has. It's recently changed curriculum, so I think if you've heard about it in the past, I think you'll be surprised. It's much more sort of techie. There's also a lot more meat and potatoes to it. Bangers and mash for those Aussies. All right. So those are the 3 types of memory: perceptual memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Perceptual memory is stuff that our perceptive ability will immediately identify and sort of unconsciously register. So if I see a traffic light and I see a red light, automatically I know it's red. I don't have to think, what color is that? Oh yeah, that's red. Short-term memory is basically anything that requires my concentration. So I might look at a chart and I might say, okay, I see some bars on here. What do these bars represent? And I'll sit there and I'll sort of work through it. And then my short-term memory, my active processing, my RAM, if you want to think of it like that, puts together what I'm looking at. And my long-term memory is accessing my my knowledge when I see something. So for instance, this is an easy example. If I see, for instance, on my employee report that our billable hours are almost non-existent on December 25th, my long-term memory makes a connection and says, oh, there's a reason for that. That's a holiday. So what I want to try to do is really leverage as much of this as possible in my visualizations so that people don't have to concentrate on what the chart is saying. I want them to concentrate on what they need to do. I want them to get business insight. I want them to get actionable intelligence. All of the other stuff, all the colors and the diagrams and everything is just for me to try to get that information to them as quickly and as easily as possible. And perceptual memory is the #1 way we can do that. So let's talk about the steps of planning a dashboard. Here they are. #1, ask questions. We're going to go into each of these in a bit more detail. #2, thinking about structure and layout, because that's very critical. 2, building it and testing it. #4, adding interactivity. 5, applying visual best practices. And #6, and this is really important, I'm a consultant in this field, trust me when I tell you this, performance. Performance is really important. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the visual stuff here, but I think it's important to kind of lay out a complete path towards success here. So I don't want to like just say, hey, focus on your colors. Hey, do this. I want to try to give you a roadmap and then really go into granular detail on the creative side. But as we all know from being Tableau users, there's actually a real first step in creating a dashboard, and it's this. Damn it, I'm looking at a white screen and I have no idea where to start. This is called writer's block. And Fee asked Robert a question before in the Q&A. Do you feel like the doodles limit you? And I would say not having anything limits you. When you're looking at a blank screen, you're like, I have no idea where to even start. So that's what this process is here for. The process is to organize your thoughts and give you an approach. It's to help you overcome that quote-unquote writer's block. So step #1, let's ask questions. We're going to ask questions before I start. And the #1 question is defining the context of our dashboard. Who, why, what, all of that type of stuff. It's really important. So the first question is, what is my objective? And I just talked about this with one of my virtual classes, I think about 2 hours ago. And I see one of my students is actually on here. So what is my objective? There are a lot of different reasons we create dashboards. And we're going to go into a use case after we kind of cover some of these questions of a data analysis project. So we might use it to monitor. So I have some clients that are in the mining and refinery business. And so they monitor particular metrics for critical assets on site. And if those go too hot or too cold, that's really important. They need to shut that down and go investigate why there's that variance. You can compare, so you're comparing different units of your business, you can compare different products, whatever. You can inspect. Think about this as the drill down analysis. I start very high level, and then I give you the ability to dig into the particular components of our business or the elements of our visualization that you're interested in. And as a result, I can give you an incredible amount of detail without overwhelming you. I start very high level or macro, and then I let you choose to go down, 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 and get more micro. And then there's also solve. So maybe we have a particular business question that's pressing, and my analysis is to solve that question. That dashboard may not have had any relevance 2 months ago, and after we solve this question, it may not have any relevance afterwards. But it's critical when you've got these business questions that need answering. Let's hop over. Now, next question, who is my audience? This makes a huge difference. Who am I trying to communicate this data to? Executives? They're going to want strategic level information. They're going to want information that has trends and patterns. Managers and analysts, as you start to go down, they're going to want more granular information. So you're going to plan your chart types to your audience. If I give an engineer on the front line, if I give him summarized information that our CFO would like to see, he's going to be really frustrated because he's not going to have the detail that he needs to do stuff. So I have to understand who this is for, and it's okay to plan different dashboards for different segments of your audience. The analogy I always use in class is if I'm giving a talk on a very particularly complicated subject like Brexit or why Trump won the presidential election in the USA. If I talk to political scientists, I'm going to talk at one level. If I talk to a room of first graders, I'm going to have to change my message appropriately. Now, let's talk about who is not my audience. And this is the problem for these hardcore Tableau people like myself. Because at our heart, we are nerds. And nerds like to show off how smart they are. And so who is not my audience? My audience is not the Tableau community. My audience is my business users. If I want to show off and do really awesome chart types, I'll do it on Tableau Public. I'll do it at the Tableau user group. But I don't want to walk into a business meeting with a chart type that no one knows how to read. We have to keep this stuff simple. Really hardcore Tableau users like to do stuff that is hard, and less so on the stuff that's simple but effective. And these are all tried and true. Everyone knows a bar chart is a very effective chart to show actual to actual as a comparison. But it's boring. I want to do something cool. But we have to resist that temptation and do what's useful, not what's cool. So save the radial bar charts and all the other crazy stuff. Save that for Tableau Public. Okay, let's talk about a use case real quick. So Kodak was founded in 1888. And in 1976, 90% market share. They basically invented the personal camera market. But they went bankrupt in 2012. What happened? Now I'm going to tell you some more stuff that's going to blow your mind. Did you know that Kodak invented digital photography in 1975? Did you know that Kodak invented the first megapixel sensor in 1986? And they also invented the first commercial digital camera in 1994. And yet, they went bankrupt in 2012. They are now a case study in every single MBA course in the world. In 1981, the executives of Kodak commissioned a study from their data scientists. And literally, these were PhD, Harvard-level data scientists. How different the world of data has changed. Now we can all be data scientists, right? And those data scientists went away, and they started digging through all of this data to make an analysis and prediction of what the future of this market was going to look like. It took them 6 months to come back. Again, an amazing difference. I don't think we really take the time to appreciate just how great technology has made our lives. We would take 6 days to come back with this analysis. So they came back in 6 months, and they said the future of our business is digital camera, digital photography, which means Kodak's business case of selling cameras at cost and having a huge margin on film was going to be obsolete. But the managers of this business, the executives, were so set in this tried and true method that they said, we don't believe you. Camera is, film is always going to be where we make our margin. And they ignored it. And as a result, they surrendered the market leader position. And there you go in 2012. So let's talk about why I'm talking about this. Who was the audience? The executives. What were they trying to do with their analysis? They were trying to solve a business problem. And as a result of them not having the tools we have today, they probably weren't as successful in communicating that because maybe the executives of this business didn't feel like they owned that data. They didn't have an involvement in that process. We're going to talk about that too, because again, this is all user adoption. Let's keep asking some questions of our data. So not only are we asking questions over who and what we're doing, but let's ask questions of our data because we have to make sure the data we're using is accurate. Again, if I take a wrong step forward and my first impression with this dashboard is a bad one, it's going to be a lot harder to get people using my tools. So is this clean data? Is it accurate? Is it down to the level of detail that I need? Is the data fast? Do we have all the data that we need? Are there fields that are missing? And if we don't, where is that data? How can we get it? These are all questions we have to ask in the real world, and we have to then make decisions. If I don't have the data I need, what can I show? And most of us don't have control over those data sources. So that's another thing to worry about. Okay, step number 2, structure and layout. We need to design and plan before we build. There's a really trite little saying, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So think of it like this, and this is how I would respond to Fiona's question before. If I'd wanted a beautiful house, and I showed up to the building site with a bunch of lumbers and nails and just started putting them together in random combinations, guess what? I'm not going to get a beautiful house. I'm going to get a pile of crap. That's why we need a blueprint. We have to put structure and layout and put those concepts, which we'll talk about in a second, into play so that we can leverage the structure and layout for the maximum effect. So let's talk about some concepts about structure and layout. I'm pulling these from the graphic design world because I think they have a lot of relevance for where we are. Let's start with eye patterns. So this is something that people have been doing for a while. They actually judge how human beings look at advertising, and then I'm going to show you how it actually works on the internet. So here's an advertisement for diapers, and they found that people were sort of missing the point of this product because most people were looking at the baby's face. They were making eye contact with the baby. When they made one little change and made the baby look at something, well, people still looked at the face, but then they're like, what's the baby looking at? I'm going to look there too. So little changes like that can actually do a huge difference in where people are directed to look. And our whole goal is to get people to look at the most important part of our dashboard. Let's take this and apply it onto technology. Eye pattern or eye tracking studies have been hugely influential on the web. So here are some various types of pages with eye tracking studies, and this illustrates a very common pattern that human beings have when they're using the internet, and they would have the same pattern when they're using technology like a dashboard. It's called the F pattern, and you can see people read that first line and then they scan down and look for anything interesting as they go down. So you can see very distinct F patterns. And also notice that most of the attention is on this left margin. We read English left to right, and so we're expecting everything to have the important stuff on the left side. That's a clue right there in layout and structure. Left side, most important. Right side, less important. One thing I'm also going to point out is because of the way the internet is, there are two really important, let me draw that on here. There are two really important parts to a web page. The first one is this top corner. That's generally where you see your title or your company logo. That's the stuff where people say, okay, I'm at where I need to be. And over here, this is generally where you see your contact information for the company or links. So we can leverage this pattern that people use when they look at web pages, which of course most of our dashboards are going to be embedded in Tableau Public or on Tableau Server or whatever. So I would recommend over here for this first little box, put the title of your dashboard and tell people what they're looking at. And then over here, and this is just a general rule, we're trying to give people hard, concrete guidelines. Obviously, once you know these guidelines and you get creative, you can break them. I would say on the other side, on the right-hand side, that's where I would recommend putting your filters, your parameters, and all those interactive elements. People will naturally look at either side of that dashboard at the top before they start scanning in that F pattern down. So I've got a question here. Any advice on how to conduct these eye tracking trails with clients? I would hire a consulting firm to do it for you. We don't do that, but I would say it's fairly intensive. You got to have the eyeglasses that actually track the eyes, and then it overlays the heat map onto your pages. It's probably going to be fairly expensive. If I missed any other questions, I'm sorry, because I'm kind of juggling multiple screens here. Okay. Let's talk about another concept when it comes to design that's really important, particularly when we talk about dashboards, and that's weight. I want you to think of weight like the gravity of a planet. And the bigger and the more dense a planet is, the more weight or gravity it has to pull other stuff towards it. Now, when I'm talking about graphic design and I say weight, I'm saying what attracts my eyes? What's gravity for my eyes? So let me give you some examples. Let me show you this slide right here. You focused on this first. It's red. That's a very alarm color, quote unquote, a heavy color, meaning that color has more weight. We looked there first, and then we started looking around to see what else was there. Understanding how this works, we can actually draw people's attention to the most important stuff on our chart. Remember, left side's the most important, bigger is going to have more weight, and then also the color selection that we use is going to have more weight, which means people are going to start there. There's other elements that we can consider with weight, like contrast. Well, naturally, we start to look at this black duck in the middle. It's the one that draws our eye. Let's look at another example here. I've got a chart here with a red dot in the middle. That red dot is actually the smallest shape in the entire little chart there. But because red is a heavy color, we've got a lot of light colors, boom, our eyes are immediately drawn to that. So just imagine that that's actually a dashboard, and how I could use that to say, this is the most important thing to look at, Mr. Dashboard user. Now start to scan everything else, and it'll give you supporting information and context. Another question I get is, how do I know how big to make my dashboard? Now, the dashboard gives you several different sizes to choose from: automatic, ranged, or fixed. And so we'll group automatic and ranged as sort of one type of sizing versus fixed. And I'm going to recommend strongly that you just do fixed for 2 reasons. We'll say 3 reasons. 1, if you have any floating objects, automatic sizing is going to guess relatively where those floating objects are going to go when you resize. So you may not get it exactly right. And if you're doing really complex dashboards, you want exactly those objects to be exactly where you want them, not a couple pixels over where they might be on top of data or covering another label. They need to be exactly where you put them. So fixed, you can guarantee it. You can't with automatic. Number 2, if you are using Tableau Server, it caches every dashboard that's served. And that caching, or keeping it in memory, allows the Tableau Server to serve it up 3 to 4 times faster the next time. And so Tableau is trying to be helpful. It's saying, somebody needs that dashboard. I'm going to remember it, and then I'm going to bring it in so that the next time someone sees it, I can get it to them faster. Here's the problem with automatic sizing. Every different size of a dashboard, even by 1 pixel's different, Tableau thinks is a new dashboard. So let me pull up Tableau here for a second. Let's pretend that this is a dashboard. We're going to use this in our presentation here in a second. And Tableau's going to remember this dashboard at this size. But if for whatever reason it's now this size, Tableau's like, new dashboard. If it's this size, new dashboard. If it's this size, new dashboard. So that caching, while trying to be helpful, can actually slow down Tableau Server, especially if you've got a lot of users that are accessing a lot of dashboards that are all automatically set. They're accessing it on desktop, laptop, mobile, tablet. You can see how quickly this can get a little bit overwhelming for Tableau Server. So do Tableau Server a favor and fix that size. I'm going to give you another reason why. This is something very true in writing. If I tell you that you have 10,000 words to write about a topic, or 1,000 words to write about a topic, I'm telling you 9 times out of 10, the 1,000-word paper is going to be the better one. Because when I force you to start choosing what's important, you're going to start cutting out the fat. And if I lock in a size, you're going to have to start making decisions and hard choices that are going to make your dashboard more effective, more efficient, more streamlined. So lock that in. Now, optimal size for your user. This is a tough one. Most companies have some sort of internal tracking, like you've got an intranet or network tracking, and these types of things normally have demographic profiles of your users. Google Analytics has this. This is actually where I got it. So you can see where most people's screen size falls. And so plan for the smallest screen size that will fit the biggest number of people. You can also talk to your IT and say, hey, for our server, do we have any sort of limitations on size? Can I go as big as I want, or do I need to stay with 800 pixels wide? And they'll give you some guidance, hopefully. So that can give you some guidance there. Now, we all know that Tableau's got, whoops, don't want you to see my pie chart yet. We know that Tableau's got those device-specific previews, so you can create a format for your phone. You can create a format for your tablet. But I do want to give you a little bit of advice when you do that. Different types of devices, like my phone, are going to require, yeah, there will be pi, trust me. There'll be another pi too. Different types of devices are going to require a different form of input, because my mouse, you can see here, is very accurate. I can put that mouse on the exact pixel that I want. My fat finger, I can't do that. So if I'm trying to do, say, a dashboard action on a scatter plot that's got 4,000 points of data, that's not a good visualization for my phone. So I would need to completely rethink the chart types and structure if that's what I've got going, and I'm really intending for a lot of users to use this on a tablet or phone or whatever. More questions to ask yourself in terms of structure. So let's go to our pie chart here. What is the best chart for your data? Well, there are very specific reasons for each chart. And this is why I put this link here, because Tableau's got a white paper on it. And you know what I'll do? I'll see if I can't. Nope. I'll if you'll hang around after I finish presenting, I'll go back to the internet. I'll grab this for you, and I'll put it into the chat window for you. You just have to have a Tableau community account, which is free. And then you can download this and read how Tableau recommends you use different charts. So scatter plots, for instance, are really good at looking at correlations between two measures, whether it's a positive correlation, a negative correlation. You can also use it to identify outliers. Bar charts are great for comparisons across actuals, because they're really good at seeing that size difference. Line graphs are really good for showing progression over time, and pie charts are good for nothing. Okay, so they're good for showing parts to the whole, but they are so overused, and you can see how the Tableau community has already sort of turned against any sort of appearance of a random pie chart. And so I put a silly one over here of Mr. T. Reminds me of Mr. T, still reminds me of Mr. T. And every class I teach pie charts, I go through 4 or 5 silly pie charts, because they're way overused. It's time to retire them, I think. Okay, let's keep talking. Now, I agree absolutely with Robert about doodling. And so I always try to draw out a plan before I go. So I've got basically like a rough little online marketing dashboard that I worked on. And this is all made up data, so I put it out on Tableau Public, so I'll show you that later. But I know that us marketing folks love this funnel analysis. So I have given it front and center billing. It's on the left-hand side. It's going to be really big. It's going to be very dynamic with colors. And then I'm supporting it with little metrics all around it. And I've got some other color stuff down here, but you're going to be drawn right to this guy, and that's the goal. My logo and what you're supposed to be doing on this chart's front and center up here, and then also all of my filters and stuff are going to be using that top corner. I would say plan as much as you can. Now, because I had a little bit more of a complex design, and I've got some floating objects that I've got to position in the right spot, I went ahead and did another drawing of my chart. But I was a little bit more specific about Tableau objects. So I was sort of planning what would I need. So I've color-coded them. So this is my dashboard title. These are some images I've got on there. And all of this other stuff are my worksheets. Now that I've got an idea of where those worksheets are and what they're supposed to be doing, I can start planning for how I'm going to use my data. Those little worksheets there that I put the arrows on, those are just numbers. Now I'm going to do some formatting around them to kind of make them stand out a little bit. And then these guys down here, I think I've got a highlight table and a line graph, and over here I've just got like a text table. So I can start to plan that weight and composition around really making, let me take all these guys off, around really making this the sexy part of my viz. So I'm trying to get everything to work as a unified tool. So let me stop there. Any questions so far? Let me scan the comments here. Okay, I think we're good. I've got time at the end of the presentation if anyone's got questions. Does someone have a question? I heard a mic.
No, that was just me. I was saying I haven't seen any questions coming through beside the other Robert C's. But this is just to give you some feedback on the way through. This is absolutely amazing. I'm loving the interactivity with you drawing on the slides as well. That's cool.
Yeah, and it just takes, just from me teaching virtuals every week for 2 years, so there you go. All right, Thank you for that, by the way. Oh, let me go back. So I did get a question here. Do I use any mock-up software? Honestly, I use Word to do this. That's all I did. I just use Word with little colored shapes to draw it on there. I can use Photoshop, but I said, you know what? I want to do this so it's something easy for anyone. And I still have that document. So if anyone wants, you can just reach out to me and I'll shoot you over the Word doc and you have a look at how I did it. Do you create that layout after you have your graphs? I would say you could, but I definitely created my handwritten one before I did my graphs. I kind of had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do. And then once I had these charts a bit, then I said, okay, let's plan for how I'm going to use the containers and the objects. These little red boxes are my containers. And Robert's sharing a lot of good tools in there, so if you've got other ideas on how to help other folks do that, sure, please contribute to the conversation in the chat. So the next step in this is building and testing.
Sorry,
so the old way to develop.
There was one other question in there that just got skipped over with the great chat that's coming through. So can you describe floating objects and their use cases as well as this make a plan, in this make a plan as well?
Okay. So let me diagram this for a second. Let me make my chat a bit bigger. So let's say I've got 3 levels of chart. I'm going to say first we have a very simple chart, which is chart, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 2x2 grid. That you can just do quite simply with tiled. So you don't really need any floating objects. You could do floating, for instance, if you wanted to put your color legend next to the chart. Let's go a little bit more difficult, a little bit more complex. What I would then do is put tiled inside of floating containers. So then what you can do is you can keep stuff very simple inside your containers, but then you can move your containers around wherever you want them to go. And then if you get super complex, then I would say go full floating. I've been watching a lot of It trailers, so the new Stephen King movie, and so every time I say float, I think of that trailer. So if anyone that's watched that, you know what I'm talking about. Now, in terms of planning for this on your layout, remember, even though it's floating, it has to have its own little real estate. So you don't have to note that it's floating. You can if you want. You can put, hey, this is floating. But it does have to have its own real estate. The way I talk about tiled versus floating is tiled are like pieces of a puzzle that are all plugged in together. And if I make one bigger, the others have to shrink. Whereas floating objects are like a deck of cards that I'm laying out, and I can put them on top of each other, move them around, whatever. But remember, I still have to allocate space for it. So Andrew asked, when are there too many items on a dashboard? I would say try to keep your dashboard under 6 visualizations, not 6 worksheets, because as you can see when I go back to my view here, let's go back. I've got quite a few worksheets. Oops, I think I'm clicking the wrong way. I've got quite a few worksheets, but they are just a single number, single number, single number, single number, single number. Number, 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 number. That's actually already what, 1, 2, 3, that's about 8 worksheets, but they're just little numbers. In terms of actual full-blown visualizations, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 4 to 6, I would say you're fine. And from a visualization performance standpoint, Tableau is incredibly efficient now at rendering, so there shouldn't be too much of a rendering problem. If your dashboard's slow, it's typically because your data is slow, or you're trying to render a million marks. Does that help, Andrew? Cool. Let's hop ahead here. Okay. Step number 3, building and testing. So the old way to develop software tools, which is what I started with, I'm actually old, I'm 40, my name is Robert. Anyway, the old way was this waterfall method, and it had very distinct steps in a linear fashion. So you would start with requirements gathering. You would meet with your stakeholders and say, what do you want? Then I would let them go away. I would talk to my design team, and I'd say, how do we build it? Then we would build it. Then we would test it. Then we would go back to our users and say, here's the tool, what do you think? Then we deploy it and we maintain it. The problem with this as anyone that has been in this development cycle can attest, is our customers are only involved here and at the very end of testing, which means our users don't have much input on what they're getting. They can tell us what they think they want, and I may not understand it, and I build them what I thought they said. But by the end of it, it's kind of too late. This is the analogy I give in my class. Imagine trying to sail an old masted ship across the Atlantic Ocean, and all you've given me is a map. And you haven't been there. So parts of your map say, here be dragons. You're not exactly sure where I'm going either. And just like Christopher Columbus, I don't arrive in India. I arrive in the New World. Now imagine nowadays that you could actually sit on that ship with me with a GPS and minute by minute say, nope, turn left, turn right, adjust by 3 degrees starboard bow. Guess what? We're going to arrive right in New York Harbor, right where you expected me to go. And that's why this development methodology is antiquated, particularly for Tableau. Tableau is a very agile tool. We can do data discovery. We can work very quickly. So rapid prototyping, agile methodology, agile development is a better way for Tableau. And so let's take the same scenario. You come to me and you ask me for a tool. We talk about what you want. We talk about the logic and the calculations and the data. I say, come back in 2 days. When you come back in 2 days, I don't have a finished product. I have a draft. I have something that's close, a prototype. You sit down and you say, wow, that's actually pretty cool, but there's some things I don't like. Maybe you got some logic wrong. Let's fix it. And there might be things that you say, wow, I didn't even know we could do that. I didn't know we had that data. Now I'm starting to think of all these other ideas. And as we go through this iteration, and each one of these is called a sprint, prototype, review, refine, iterate, we do these sprints in very short little time frames, and that way you are very close to the process, and I have user buy-in from the very start. And when I'm done with this tool, guess what? You're excited about using it. I don't have to convince you it's a good tool. And since you're now my evangelist for this tool, you're going to go tell other people to use it. Remember our metric? User adoption. This is a great way to get people involved and get them excited about working with this tool, and also the capabilities of Tableau. Okay, let's talk about the interactivity. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. This is a bit more functional. But we have this idea of these sort of 5 main things that we can use to build interactivity. Our filters, whether global or local, parameters, filter actions, highlight actions, URL actions. These are great for building user adoption. Remember, if you've got a small group of users, you can still build user adoption by how much time on tool that they've actually got. If they're using it for 5 seconds a day, sure, that's a good tool. But if they're using it for 25 minutes a day, because there's a lot of stuff they can dig into, and there's a lot of analysis they can do ad hoc, guess what? That's a great tool. That's our goal, user adoption. But don't forget, it's just not these big ones here. There's other types of interactivity. Making our tooltips less Tableau-y and more friendly, written in common English. Lots of cool stuff in there. Tableau 10.3 now has the ability to do data selection from your tooltips. That's more interactivity. Make your titles and your labels dynamic. Give context to your views based off of their selections. Also consider, and this is particularly useful for people that aren't Tableau people, that aren't visual people, connect to another dashboard that's just a text table so they can have the raw numbers. That way those accountants and finance people and engineers, they have what they're looking for too. And you can go back and forth, they can look at the actual data, and then they can actually look at the visual side of it and say, wow, okay, I'm starting to see this visual thing. I've got the data, but I'm seeing what you're talking about. And there's more stuff. I'd say if you brought in Zen masters from all over the continent, all over the world, they'd have more ideas here. So I'd say keep in the Tableau community, keep fresh, keep with the 10.4 as we're going. Lots of cool stuff that you can borrow and use from Tableau Public and from the forums and everything. So let's talk about step number 5. Visual best practices. Our brain is a supercomputer. But here's the caveat. We have to give it the right kind of data. So when I'm going throughout my day, very rarely do I feel like my brain is a supercomputer. I spill coffee on myself. I get told off from my wife for not putting away dinner last night. I'm constantly making mistakes. But if you give our brain the right type of data, all of a sudden we unlock 1,000,000 years of evolution and we're super fast. Our brains work differently than computers, and we have to understand that. So what's something that our brain is really good at? Color. Our brain is very, very quick at going through and deciphering color. So let's do a little test here. We'll do this quickly. So here is the text table I was showing you. I'm going to give you guys a test. I want you to look at this chart and come back with the highest and the lowest number on this chart. There are 544 different fields. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pretty hard because we're doing value to value comparisons. And we have some guesses here. 14,508. I don't think that's right. And we have some other guesses. So let's do one little change to this chart. We're going to add color. And now you're going to see how all of a sudden that supercomputer in our head boots up and gets to work. Watch. Now that I've added color, what's the highest and the lowest of this chart? Well, automatically our eyes get drawn here and here because we're really good at looking at color. Because when we were in little societies out in the African plains and out in the wilderness, color was huge. Do I eat the blueberry or do I eat the red one that looks dangerous? It was a survival method. So we can use that same perceptual memory in our charts. Now, there's another thing about color to talk about. Let's go back to our visualization or our pie chart, or rather, where am I head at? Our presentation here. Psychology. I can lead people through an analysis by using color. So I have to be careful because remember, there's this whole saying, there's 3 types of lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. And that applies to us as data analysts. Let's do another example. I'll hop over here. Now, I've got a chart here that's showing profitability by subcategory. Now you can see you're looking at that blue. Blue is a positive color. I've clearly demarked the unprofitable with a light blue, but I'm kind of being deceptive. I'm telling you a story of the stuff that we've done well and underpinning, taking away from the stuff we haven't. If I make one change on color, well, now all of a sudden I'm highlighting failure. You see how this changes the narrative of this view? Psychology and color, important concepts. I would say we'll go to this little view here, use your alarm colors sparingly. Use them on purpose. Limit your color palette to 3 or 4 colors. Now you can have shades of those colors and make sure you're consistent across worksheets. So if you've got a color that represents sales on one view, like green on sales, and in another view you've got sales, that's got to be green too. Because remember, now you're forcing your user to concentrate. They're no longer using perceptual memory, they're using short-term memory, and that makes it harder to decipher what you're saying. Let's do another test. So here is a use of color. Now if I did that, automatically everyone says, that's bad. That's way too many colors. But yet you will see dashboards that look like this. And guess what? That's still a lot of color. I need to be consistent. I need to limit that palette so that I don't have to look at each chart and figure out what these colors all mean. Keep your colors simple, keep them consistent, and use them with purpose, particularly these alarm colors here. That one and that one is going to say, hey, we got a problem. That's what our brains are programmed to think. Okay, let's go back to our... So some other little thoughts here. Titles and text. We want to, 1, tell our user what this worksheet or this dashboard is to do. Give them a question and then let them perceptually see the data and then answer it. Asking a question of people is going to help frame how they use your dashboard. It's really just that simple. Also, tell your users what they're supposed to do. If you've got filters, say, select a year. Tell them what they're to do. And if there's a particular order that this has to work, number them. Say, number 1, pick a country. Number 2, pick a state. Guide them, help them. Label your chart with interactive elements. Again, make those titles contextual. If people make selections, you can label those. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff with your labels. Go check the community. I've written articles on it. There's a lot of cool stuff. Number 1 thing here, remove your chart junk. This is like eye pollution. So I'm going to show a visualization here. That not a visualization, but it's called Naked Data. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it by Dark Horse Analytics. Make sure you don't search for this on your work network. Who knows what will come up. Let that load. Zoom is taking up a lot of my bandwidth. So we're going to look at this chart here, and it's going to start with an over-formatted Excel-style bar chart, and we're slowly going to be pulling out all of the unnecessary stuff that's making it harder to read, harder to visualize, and now we're going to go to something that's very simple and even elegant. So I'm taking away all this extra labeling, lightening it up so that it's not so strong. Translation, it doesn't have as much weight. I'm drawing your attention to what's important. That red bacon, who doesn't love bacon? I'm sorry for the vegetarians on the call. So we go from something really ugly like this, and then we go to something very effective like that. And that second bar chart can be on a dashboard with a lot of buddies, and it doesn't make it hard for them to discern each different one. Whereas over-formatting and over-labeling, I have to concentrate on each individual chart to figure out what you're trying to tell me. So thank you, Dark Horse Analytics. It's a great chart. They've got other good stuff on there too. Okay, now we've got our chart junk off. Let's talk about building that F pattern. So remember, we want to go everything, all the important stuff on the left side. And we want to go top to bottom, kind of build what's important. And I'm going to show you guys a visualization I prepared. Not this one. Where's my internet? I think, did I just close it? Nope, here it is. So this is not meant to be showy off. This is not like, my point is to try to make something effective here. So look how I set up this F pattern. I have subtitles, oops, let me try that again. I have headers, subheaders that are colored that are going to promote that scan. So people can sort of start to look through this chart quite quickly and see what's important. Obviously, this is the visual design that I actually showed you the drawings for. That middle part has a lot of weight. And I did that on purpose with this really colorful, three-dimensional picture that I just put on here and then stacked all my data on top of it. Now, there are some Tableau purists that say that shouldn't be on there because you can't create it in Tableau. I'm not one of those people. My whole goal is to try to make it effective. And then you can see I've got these guys down here. They're not over-labeled. The colors are very simple. Speaking of colors, my impressions are the same color across the entire table. My conversions are the same color across the table, and so are my sessions. Consistent color, limited palette. Let's go back to our presentation. So now, performance testing. I'm going to give you two pieces of advice here. Number one, get your users to test, and you don't actually have to blindfold, and that's not what I mean when I say blind test. What I do mean is get someone that's got a relative amount of knowledge for who your user is going to be about your business. So if they understand the metrics, and get a relative amount of knowledge for Tableau. So if they're a complete noob to Tableau but understand the advanced metrics of your business, that's the person that you want sitting down at your desk and going into your dashboard with no instruction. Just watch how they use your dashboard. And if you can, get 2 or 3 people to do it and just watch them. Watch where they click, watch where they move their mouse around. This is where you'll get an idea if your structure, if the weight of these objects is pointing in the wrong direction, if it's leading people to look at the wrong stuff. This is a great way to do it. And the other thing that's really important is performance testing. Again, we're all about user adoption. All that visual stuff is just to make sure it's easy to access. If your data is slow, if your dashboard is slow, it's bad. I take that back. It's very bad. I've got a chart that I pulled data from here. Online abandonment for pages loading on mobile phones. And I think this has a fairly good correlation because people aren't expecting your dashboard to load as fast as a web page. So they know that stuff's going to take a little bit of time. So you'll have a little bit of patience. So you can see here, as I start to change how long this loads, we'll let my visualization load here. As I start to increase the amount of time it loads, look how quickly people start to get frustrated and leave. So within 15 seconds, you've got 65% abandonment. And if I have to wait more than 20 seconds, guess what? People are gone. Now, they may wait longer for your dashboard, but this is relative. The longer they wait, the more you're going to lose users. And remember, you don't get another chance to make a first impression. So make sure it's efficient and fast at the very start. Other considerations, just to kind of round this out, governance, quality assurance. So you want to make sure your data and your dashboards that are going into production are good. You also want to check who can access this project or who has access to this site. Make sure that the right audience can access it. Another cool thing you can do is you can create ad hoc templates that have all of these design elements in there that can very quickly and easily do one-off analysis so that your users can come in, use the web editing tool on Tableau server, and do 1 or 2 changes and then get what they need out of it. You're supporting self-service analytics, you're empowering them to get data, and you're also getting people to use your visualizations. So, next steps, where do we go from here? The internet is your friend. Well, the internet can be your friend. There are a lot of trolls on the internet. I don't suggest going to YouTube and reading the comments, but go to the Tableau community. Look for videos, look for blogs. There's a lot of content, even not specifically to Tableau, but there's a lot of content to help you with your design skills. Even if you're a very technical person without a creative bone in your body, remember it's a skill and you can perfect that skill. I'd also recommend going and taking the Tableau Visual Analytics course. You can take it online, you can take it in person. It's very different than the other courses for people that have done training. It's more of a workshop. I give you a data set, I give you some ugly dashboards, and I say, take the principles we've talked about and make it look better. Pretty fun. Now, that's it for me. I'm opening up to any questions. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's lovely to see a lot of data friends on the call. I hope you found value in this. And if you don't, then Robert Crocker was the one that gave this presentation, and send your complaints to him.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Robert Crocker, Curtis.
Thank you.
You did a fantastic job. It's honestly, I'm sitting here and my head's a little I'm a little overwhelmed, to be honest. There were so many great tips and tricks in there. I think that I'm definitely going to have to go back through this video and slowly, really absorb all of the different things that will really help out.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. My pleasure.
One of the things I've actually got 2 questions of my own before people get stuck in. So one of the things that you mentioned was around your dashboard, around the amount of time that people spend in your dashboard to be used as a measurement. And I've got a flip side of that, as a measurement for adoption and success. I've got a flip side. In my team, I tell my team, the least amount of time that people are spending in the dashboards to understand where they need to focus their attention is how they should design. I was wondering if you could discuss that for a little bit with me.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you. Let me refine what I was saying. We want to make it very fast for people to achieve objectives on your dashboard. So if they're looking for a particular number, we want them to find it quickly. But we want to give them a lot of utility so they can do a lot of cool stuff on your dashboard. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things for me around Viz Design is I don't want people clicking 50 times to get to the answer. If I can make it, happen bang as soon as they open up the dashboard. But absolutely, if there's some analysis to be done that we can help people to self-serve, and that's when they're clicking through and spending the time, then definitely keen for that.
And honestly, if you make people do 50 clicks, your user adoption is going to suffer in the long run anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. The second question that I have for you is around the Visual Analytics refreshed or revamped course. You mentioned just at the end there that you give people some visualizations to make over and improve. I was just wondering, what's your recommendation around how much Tableau experience should people have before they join that course?
There isn't any sort of official prerequisite, and honestly, a Zen master could go in there and obviously when he has 10 minutes to recreate a view, he's going to do all kinds of crazy stuff. But a complete novice can go in there, and the whole idea is just applying style and color and formatting. So I would say have at least the D1 level skills so you understand how to operate in Tableau. You'll get more out of it if you can think more about what you're doing rather than how to do it, but you don't need really much more than that.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to answer some of these questions because I know we're right on time. I'm feeling bad about cutting to the next speaker. So for the tool that I used, it is called Zoom It, and it's a free tool. I think it's a Microsoft tool. Let's see here. Ooh, we got a lot of questions. Tips to get your seat.
Why don't you answer the questions on the chat while the next presentation keeps going? Is that okay?
That is a perfect idea.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody for listening.